Joel, pronouns are he, him in Alabama. Thanks so much for waiting. You had a question about, I don't even understand your question as it's written, so you just ask it.
Okay, thank you. Do you believe that the universe is the result of an uncaused cause?
That the universe is the result of an uncaused cause?
Yes.
I have no idea. So I would have to say that no, I'm not necessarily convinced of that because I don't have any way to assess it. The universe, by the way, that I'm talking about is our local presentation of the universe. And since I don't know what there is to know about its origin or whether it's unique or what caused it, it would be a mistake for me to say, oh, it was caused by some X, or that it was caused by an uncaused cause, because there could be a causal chain or multiverse that's just spitting out universes. And then I don't have any way of assessing what the causality or the foundations of that multiverse is. Does that answer your question?
Well, let me ask another question. Do you believe the universe is a product of an infinite regress of previous causes?
I just explained to you that I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. So when time, as best we can tell, based on the best models that we have, began with Big Bang cosmology, with the origin of the universe. It might be absurd to ask what happened before that, okay? Because what happened before time is a nonsensical question. But if we talk about it in terms of like a meta time, where you have time for our universe, but there may be another meta time for a multiverse or a God-caused universe, all of those are potential explanations for our universe. But I don't think that we have any way currently to assess which of those is correct.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, or are we just going to, like, have you got like a script?
I'm not sure. I'm thinking about this. What I'm thinking is that it's at a certain point, there was nothing but God, and then God created the universe. So
what, Joel? What leads you to conclude that at some point there was nothing but God? How'd you reach that conclusion?
Because I don't believe in an infinite series of previous changes and universes.
Well, that's not the only option outside of that. It was you're making a cosmological argument. The issue is we don't have a necessary dichotomy of an uncaused causer or an infinite regress of things. What we have is, as far as we can see, we have we can go back to a beginning of an expansion of the observable universe that we have right now. And when I say the observable universe, as Matt pointed out, we only see our sphere of the universe that we are in. We can't even see the entire extent of this universe and don't know much about it. We are very ignorant. What we see is that it began to expand from a certain point, and something was there before that, but we don't have more to say about how this expansion exactly started, what happened before that, whether there is a multiverse, whether we are just a loop of big bangs or whatever it is. So there is nothing that we can further say about this certainty. You can only speculate about that.
Yeah, and as I pointed out, it may be absurd to talk about before the Big Bang, but where you, Joel, are saying at some point there was nothing but God, somebody else could say at some point there was nothing but the multiverse. And since we don't have evidence for either of them, it would be, and plus there may be other options as well, since we don't have evidence for either of them, and neither of them is a falsifiable, testable proposition, it would be a mistake for anybody to conclude that at one point there was nothing but the multiverse, and it would be a mistake for them to conclude that at one point there was nothing but God. The only correct, viable answer to this question right now is I don't know.
Exactly.
And it's a mistake for people to pretend that they do, especially if they're trying to prop up the notion of a God, because the God notion carries with it a lot of baggage. And the truth is, the world, the universe that we inhabit, does not look the way we would expect it to look if, in fact, there was a personal agent God who was loving and caring and all the things. I don't know what God you believe in, so I don't. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Well, I don't believe in a loving, caring God, but I do believe in a God.
Okay, what's the evidence for the God, and what are the characteristics of your God?
The evidence is that, as you say, according to Big Bang cosmology, we can only go back so far. But logically, we can infer that there had to either be a beginning to everything, where before that time there was nothing, like I say, but God, or there was an infinite regress of previous causes.
No, sir. No, sir. So first of all, that's not evidence. A logical inference, which we've already pointed out, there are other potential explanations, and the ones that you've got already are problematic. But what are the characteristics of the God you believe in?
I would just say that God is a mind and the cause of all things.
Okay. What evidence do you have that there is a mind that is the cause of all things? And was that mind also the cause of itself?
No, it wasn't the cause of itself.
Okay, so it wasn't the cause of all things. So now your definition of God has already changed to God is a mind that is the cause of all things except God and possibly something else.
No, just God is the cause of all things except himself.
How do you know that God is the cause of all things except himself and not the cause of all things except himself and some other stuff?
I don't know that.
Okay, then why are you telling me the characteristics of a God? And when I ask about how you know them, you say you don't know. Do you have any way to demonstrate that the characteristics you've ascribed to God are actually accurately reflected in any mind anywhere?
Well, I think you can look at things like the fact that the universe is balanced on a knife's edge. I mean, we wouldn't be here if the constants were different and all that. I think that indicates purpose.
Well, you're wrong, because it's not. The supposed fine-tuning of the universe, we are the life that could and did evolve in this universe. If things were different, something else may or may not have evolved, but you can't look at the end result and assume that it was the result of an intentional thought. That's just fallacious thinking. Thinking.
Okay, but you said
that is a cognitive bias.
You said I'm wrong. No,
yes, that the universe is not actually balanced on a knife edge with fine tuning. That is demonstrably not the case. Yeah. Now, it may not have been any other way, but you can't look at the state of things the way they are and say that if they'd been differently, X could, or you can say, okay, if for example, if there was no gravity, certain things wouldn't happen. But you can't say that if there were slight adjustments, something similar wouldn't have occurred.
Life wouldn't have occurred.
You don't know. You don't know how and why. What are the properties that are required for life, and what wouldn't? Can you prove that if we changed gravity by 0.0001%, that life couldn't evolve?
If we changed gravity, it wouldn't. I can't prove it. I'm not a scientist, but I don't.
Exactly. So why are you reaching conclusions about shit you don't know and don't understand, and then concluding that the best explanation is that there's a magical mind behind it all?
But you've already concluded that there's no purpose, and you can't prove that there isn't a purpose.
Okay, I'm sorry, but if you're just going to go down the route of, well, you can't prove there's not, you might as well stick your fingers in your ear and say, "Nuh-uh, I'm not," or "Yes, I am, and so are you," or whatever else. No, because it's not up. No, because it's not up to me to prove that there isn't a God. It's up to you to prove there is. And I didn't already reach the conclusion that there's no purpose. I said, and we didn't even talk about purpose or in that sense. My position is that you haven't demonstrated that there's an externally imposed purpose or an external agent at all. What you've done is looked at a state of affairs and decided that you don't buy into the notion that it could have been a different way, and therefore there must be a mind behind it. And what we're asking you for is evidence for that conclusion. And what we get is, well, you don't have any way to prove it, and you're not a scientist. well, then stop making shit up.
What I find interesting is that if you look into the universe as far as we observe it right now, the vast majority of what we can see around us, the vast majority of objects we see around us are, ruled by, I don't know if ruled is even the right word there, but ruled by chaos and disorder. The planet that we are on and that we live on is full of chaos and disorder. We talk about it all the time, and we exist despite it and complain about it all the time. We try to adjust our way of living in order to manage to survive and live well in this in the middle of this chaos. Much of the objects that fly around us the entire time are just completely aimlessly flying through emptiness. We cannot live in most of the space that we see out there. The planets that are in our solar system, you could not argue that they have to be there. On the contrary, you could argue that some of those make things worse because they attract objects which would otherwise not come into our direction, for example. But to argue that that there must be a perfect designer, there must be a reason because we happen to exist, we happen to live in the middle of all the chaos that we see, is simply a very bad point to make and a very bad starting point to argue for a god, I think.
So yeah, I guess, Joel, all we're saying is, what's the reason to think there's a mind behind it?
Okay, well, when there are blind people who have had near-death experiences and they've been blind their whole lives, and they can see things in the near-death experience. This has been scientifically recorded. So what would be the explanation for that other than soul or spirits?
Okay, so first of all, that's completely irrelevant to the question I was asking you, but I'll answer it, and that is the eyes are not the process, are not the determination about sight. The brain is. The brain has imagery, and people who are unsighted are aware of and have a concept of people being sighted and hear things their entire life. It's not like blind people don't dream. But in any case, hang on, Joel. Hang on, Joel. Your question, my question was, what evidence do you have there's a mind behind it? And you came up with, there are blind people who've had near-death experiences who see things. What's your explanation for that? And I'm going to go make this really easy for you, Joel. I have no explanation. Let's just pretend that nobody has any explanation for why blind people who've had near-death experiences see something. How does that in any way demonstrate that there's a mind behind it? If the answer is we don't know. Instead, what's happening is you're saying, because you don't know, or because I don't know, or because I can't think of a better reason, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is evidence for God, which is an absolute load of fallacious crock of bullshit. The fact that we don't have an answer for something doesn't mean you can go sticking your God in there. What is the evidence for a mind behind it all? Last chance.
Well, I don't know if I would convince you, but I think to me, it seems self-evident that there's a mind.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you.
Yeah, if you're going to call in and waste our time to say that God is self-evident, we're not interested.
Yeah.
Want an argument with some actual evidence.